Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Welcome to the Business Transformation Podcast. My name is Heath Gascoigne, and this is the show for business transformators who are part business strategists, part business designers, part collaborators, and part negotiators. Business transformators have moved past just business design and includes oversight of implementation of those business designs and business transformations, and includes stakeholder management, coordination, and negotiation. If you work in strategy development and implementation and you work to ensure that the design and technology are aligned, then you are a business transformator. This is the show where we speak to industry experts and professionals to share their stories and insights to help you start, turn around, and grow your business transformation. Welcome to the Business Transformation Podcast. And in this episode, we are talking to one of those industry experts. We are speaking to Kenneth Lennon. I'll say that again, Kenneth Lennon, the manager and senior business transformation analyst with a focus on digital transformation at a high growth organization. The function as a business strategist, business and service designer, understanding business and customer and user needs, value stream process management, capability models with supporting technology and removing pain points to drive continuous improvement. Kenneth sees the digital transformation as an overreach of 5 skills: human-centered design thinking, customer experience, user journey, business and data analysis, implementation, agile, and change management. At any given time, the expert can and will move that between the skill sets to meet the desired outcome of the organization. Currently, Kenneth is a senior manager and business transformation analyst manager at Metaphase Consulting, previously also director of user experience at the University of Maryland, and the consultant human-centered design lead at the Associated Veterans. Sorry there, Kenneth. Kenneth, thank you for your time and glad to have you on your show. Now, part of the reason why I was very keen to get you on the show, you're all the way from over in the States on the East Coast, is that in terms of transformation projects, you are right in the detail. You're in delivery. Now, I come into projects. I come in at often at the strategic level, setting the strategy and implementation and projects and portfolios, how they're going to implement those transformations. But you are right in the detail, and I'm interested to talk to you, and I'm sure our audience is also, because you're at the coalface, and where change and transformation falls apart is in delivery and delivery risk, and this is where you are. So, welcome to the show. I want to ask you a couple of questions, or three main areas we want to cover. What are you seeing in terms of trends? You're being in the coalface now, user experience, business analysis, transformation. What are you seeing trends in the market, and what is good, what is bad, what is happening there? Is there a particular approach that you follow? I think you follow a human-centered approach, but let's step through that. What does that look like? And then for mainly, let's say newbies or people entering into this business transformation industry. Now, there's like almost a proven path. Usually it's going through some analyst role or graduate role, working their way up to maybe in terms of consulting speak, associate to managing consultant, and all the way up to maybe partner, and they move out of analysis role into maybe strategic role. So you're at the really, this is your piece. You're the master of your ceremonies and business analysis and transformation at that delivery level. So the question for that is, what would you do differently now that where you are now? Would you do anything differently, and what would that look like?
I think if I would do anything differently.
But that's the last question.
Oh,
Sorry, that's the last question. The first question is the trends. So what are you seeing at the moment? The industry itself is reporting, it depends what research you're looking at. Gartner will tell you one thing, McKinsey will tell the other. It's looking between 7% failure rate, and the other end, it's talking up to 89% failure rate. So what you're in the coal face. You do this every day. This is bread and butter for you. What are you seeing? What's working? What's not working?
I think one of the key things that I see happening is basically a data integration issue is one of them. So a lot of times, almost consistently, there's a lack of data integration, which reduces the ability to get a long-term strategic outcomes. That big data element, that's often missing. So basically what you're doing is you're solving problems within a small segment, which makes you redo the work. Now, it might
Uh-huh.
be a cost benefit short term, but long term, you're reworking everything because you're basically building experiences for each one of those siloed data systems. And instead of taking a step back, integrating the data, seeing a larger picture of the problem, and then holistically looking at what the problems are, and then building those improvements based on you having a wider overview. That's one of the key trends that I commonly
Uh-huh.
see.
Okay. So so you're saying that people need to, instead of going seeing the forest for the trees, they need to step back to see if they're even in the right forest.
Yes.
Okay, so why is that? Why is it? I know for technology guys, they like to play with the technology, and so the first place they start wanting to solve the problem is, it's like running around the building with their hammer, and every their hammer being technology, and every problem is a technology problem because they're holding the technology in their hand. But if they took that out of their hand for a second, they realize, no, maybe not every problem needs to be solved with technology. But here you're saying that people are straight to the detail. Why is that?
I mean, I think it's commonly the quickest, the lowest hanging fruit. I mean, ideally, you want to look at things from people, processes, and technology, but
Oh, you're speaking my language.
it takes a
Yeah.
lot of maneuvering to get through all of those facets, and particularly the people, because people don't like change, and that's where there's such a large change
Yes.
element in that business and digital transformation process. People don't really like the change, but technology, I mean, it can be used as a catalyst for change much easier than changing people.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you said something interesting there, that people don't like change. I agree with that. I think people are naturally change adverse. There is a way to let's say enable or bring people on that journey. How do you do it?
Basically, change management, in my experiences with the projects I work on, is very key. Very key.
Yeah.
Change management is probably one of the biggest elements. So you have, the strategists and the visionary people coming up with what should change, but then you have the change management and support working with you as you move through that process. On the change management, they more so enable adoption methods, communication methods, any type of training methods to help ensure that adoption. But what I've seen is in public versus private, that change management aspect is much stronger in the public versus private. But I do think it is a very, very strong element
Really?
needed. Yeah.
Wow. So on the public side is stronger. You're seeing it's a good word, stronger. I don't know, presence and application of change management in the public sector as opposed to the private.
Hmm.
Wow. So is it so government are aware of the human aspect of, because you like human centered, right?
Hmm.
The human aspect of the change.
Yes, very, very much so. It's always someone around. There's always a resource for it. They always have a strong presence of change management. Always.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I have and over here in the UK, I think, yeah, you're probably the same. I'm not sure the degree. Maybe it's slightly, 60-40. Most of the government projects I've worked on anyway, they had a very strong user experience, user driven. I wouldn't say human centered, but they were more cognizant of the user experience, and then brought in a change manager. Versus about 10 years ago, change management was seen as a really nice to have. And if you had the time or the budget, you would bring in a change manager to help you. But that change manager was really about midway through the project when coming up with or assisting with the impact or change analysis and people, process, technology, and data, then helping develop training plans. Doing the training needs analysis and going, okay, well, what's your training currently, or your competencies, what you're good at, what you're not good at, what's the changes are, what competencies we need to improve, and then just help with really the technical side of that change, but not the personal side. What do you see?
I see definitely on the personal side. In
Oh,
some
wow.
ways, there's a lot of overlap within that business analysis. So there's almost
Mm.
using the same skill set to a degree, except
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the one element and where that change happens is when you're looking at that an approach. The approach that I use, or probably many other people use, that there's more emphasis with change management when you're trying to change a service process compared to a product. So user experience is
Yeah.
more aligned to a product, and it has typically less change management when you're looking at that, compared to if you're trying to change a process within that department, organization. It's a service process, how they do something. There's a lot of change management with that. So I think there's a little bit of a difference with change management and relevant to product versus service.
Okay, so it's in your experience, it's the type of um with you what how would you call that, the type of project, whether it was a service based or if it was a product based change transformation, or that was the main area of change, or the the I can't think of the word, but not say the product because it is, what's it, you can't make the name and the definition.
Mm-hmm.
The type, let's call it the type. Okay, so the degree that change management is used is maybe a factor of the type of the project, whether it was be service or was it a product. So the call out there for the learners, the listeners, would be, if you have a product based change project, then you may have slight less, or a lesser demand or need for a change manager. However, if you have a service based business, then you should have or be more cognizant that you would need a change manager or more business change capability on your project.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Because you're dealing in a service, you're dealing more with people, processes, and technology simultaneously. Not to say that you're
Yeah,
not dealing with that on the product side, but not as holistically, in my experience. When you're dealing with that, changing someone's process on how they work, that people element is very strong. While you're updating an interaction, it just maybe that interaction doesn't particularly touch anybody, maybe
yeah,
on the
yeah.
back end. So that's where I see some of the change management in terms of differences versus people, compared to service, or product versus service.
Okay, so you said something interesting, like the changing ways of working. Like with the client here that I'm helping with at the moment, and with my team, I'm telling them, we're in the discovery phase, and everyone's playing nice. They are, and the stakeholders are playing nice, at least that they are quite happily to come to all the workshops and put all their pains on the board, or on Mural or whatever system we're using, and allow them to be captured, and they like it. They feel like they've been listened to. They get to get something off their chest. And I said to the team, this is, just be cognizant of where we are in the process. We're in discovery right now. We're not changing the way they're working. But when we come to design, we're now going to design the future and change the ways of working. And that's when you're going to see people go from, oh, we're quite happy, to crossing their arms and saying, now you're changing my life.
Yeah.
And that's when the resistance comes.
Mm-hmm.
And said, so I think part of that, uh, when we start asking for their, or putting proposals for how we could solve their pains, improve their experience, we can do that. It depends on the degree of change. If it's a massive change, we might face a lot of resistance. But if we've understood the problem well enough, we've got them on board, and we've built a good, strong rapport and understanding that when it comes to this future part, where they start crossing their arms because the ways of working are changing, then we might be on a good footing that we can put these proposals forward. If we didn't have this rapport and we didn't get this understanding, we might not be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. So what in summary it is, depends where you are in the process. And if you rush through, which I've been in projects where they just want to rush through to design without fully understanding the current state. When you get to this design and they go, well, that doesn't solve our problem, and go, well, what problem? Well, the one that you didn't define. Yeah. So, what do you think? That when there is a people's attitude to change and ways of working is dependent on where it is in the process of the transformation project, or you generally maybe in America, it's like no, it's you're going to face resistance along the whole process. So you just have to be careful.
I mean, it depends on the organization. Each organization is different, so and that's why it's key for probably to get a maturity. So one of the questions I ask basically is that data maturity question, because that's going to tell me basically how, from a technology standpoint, at least at the very least, how well
Mm-hmm.
will be, or how easy it will be to be effective, because I'll be able to have data that can support the maturity and how to get from point A to point B. And then there's other aspects in terms of when you look at maturity of any type of change, technology is going to change, but it depends on how
Mm-hmm.
people do their jobs. So, anytime, and that's where to me you get into that Lean Six Sigma. So, Lean Six Sigma is about standardization,
Mm-hmm.
So when you map out a process, you look at the steps that, of that process. You have step A, B, C. Once you can standardize something, you basically can automate it. Once you can automate it, you can eliminate someone from doing it. So
Yeah. Wasting people.
yeah. So once you start to ask those kind of questions, I think a lot of people have the foresight to realize, why are they asking me that? Because if my job becomes so simple that they don't want to pay me for it, I don't want to tell them the answers. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
there's a lot of trepidation in terms of technology, using those approaches to innovate because it can impact them on an individual level, which is where the
Yeah.
change
Yeah.
management
Yeah.
aspect is very important to be able to mitigate.
So that's that maybe what is it, a symptom of people not I call it the WH the what's in it for me, the WHIFM, what's in it for me. So they're seeing what's in this for me. If it's not beneficial to me, then I'm going to I'm going to retract or the willingness for me to participate in this, or suggest ideas or reveal too much because it might be shooting myself in the foot.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, and it might be subconscious, but I mean,
Yeah,
I've seen it numerous times. You know,
yeah.
it's just
How do you get over it? How do you get past that point?
one of the skills you have to use is relationships. So that change management, understanding how they feel and why they may feel like that, and sometimes that has to be noted. You can't force change on people. You have to work with
Mm,
people, like in most
yeah,
things
yeah,
in life. You can't force an outcome. You have to work with them
yeah,
on that outcome.
yeah.
So,
That's the old lead a horse to water, right?
yep.
Good luck trying to move that horse's head to make it drink that water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like yeah. So I think so. The part of that then, I think you mentioned the word culture before. Um, if you've got I think a strong culture, and I think this is culture and people in these transformation projects, and there's big transformation projects, whether they're called digital transformation, which I have a personal a view on digital transformation. I'm pretty sure that artificial intelligence was always artificial intelligence and machine learning was always machine learning. There might have been some algorithm driven something or other, still the algorithm thing. So when you say a digital transformation, I don't think, and so the digital transformation in the context of these projects are that they have now gone from paper based and now they've gone to a digital, operating model. So they've eliminated the paper and now they've done it by automation and there's less paper, the paperless office. So they've gone and done a digital transformation. So the word being digital transformation, did the now you've ended up with a automated system, maybe a robotic process automation system.
Mm-hmm.
Did the robotic process automation system change? No, it was always a robotic automated system. What changed was the business changed from being paper based to automated. It wasn't the digital that changed. The digital was always the digital. So what my view is when people start saying the digital transformation project, well, the digital change, or was it the business that changed by using digital technologies? And so I think the language, and so yeah, that there is about I think technology guys um, banging on their drum for some time. Because the money is spent on technology or digital, they've got the talking stick because that's where the money is spent, and so people listen to them because that's where the money is spent, and they go, well, they are in charge now because they've got the budget, they own the budget, or the closest the person who has the budget. But I don't think it is really technology, digital transformation. It's business transformation using digital technology in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
But so, all out of that, the change that happens is the focus on technology, but the forgetting about the people element and also the culture. What do you think?
I totally agree. I mean, and that's why you have a lot of those co-creation sessions. At least what we do, we have co-creation sessions, and that's where you learn about that pushback. Uh,
Yeah.
so you have to keep the client, involved at each state. And to me, you have outcomes for each step that you go through within that process. But the pushback comes when people start to become aware of that something may dramatically change what they're doing, whether it's a power struggle,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a learning curve, whether it's elimination of their
Yep.
entire role. So that's from my experience what I've seen numerous times.
Okay. So, um, yeah, I've seen elements of that too. It's really to the point where I've seen projects get shut down because the person that would be or the team leader, for lack of a better word, would lose part of the empire that they organised, that would be shut down completely because of they would lose too much. But lose too much in terms of the empire they've created. But there is, I think, ways to overcome that. Besides, if you had a proverbial bus come and knock you, take you out of the picture, like close down the project. But there is I think there is a way to address that, to overcome that resistance. Like I try to explain to, like if it's operations and some part of the process might be automated, and I'll say, I don't know if we should do this because I'm going to lose this. But I said, well, the good news is processes can be automated up to a point, to the point where the decision making becomes so complex that it needs a human to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the best part is we will automate the mundane, repetitive, basically data entry processes or parts of the tasks within those processes, so that you will only deal with the exceptions. And so your job becomes more exciting because you'll deal with the complex tasks that we could not automate. And so you should be excited that you don't have to do this rubber stamping tick box, lick the envelope, slide it into the whatever, the letterbox. You don't have to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Your job is more exciting. What do you think? There's ways around it, or and maybe in America they don't see that. They like, no, it's all change or no change.
No, I think there's ways around it. I think like I said, it's organizational. I think that there's, perhaps differences in between public and private. I also think that it also depends on what type of company in terms of scale. Some smaller companies maybe have a little bit, maybe able to be more innovative faster than a larger
Yeah, yeah.
organization. There
Mm-hmm.
might be more bureaucracy in larger organizations. That's not always the case. I think one of the things in a larger organization is that in order to transform, and it's so big that you're really moving the Titanic. So
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
almost have to look at a departmental level. So when you start looking at transformations, you're really looking at a business model.
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing step A, B, C, D to make profit. But then when you break that down organizationally, within those 4 steps, it might be another 10 step within each step, and then within those
Yeah, yeah.
10 steps, you get 12 different databases.
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Okay, so this probably leads into the other question about your approach that you follow. So it sounds like, in my approach, you would say, you build it up from the base up, the structure, organization structure, the stakeholders are in that, user journeys, processes, supporting those journeys, and the capabilities. You talked about all the processes and identifying. Okay, let's drill down into those processes. I would call that sounds like to me a bit of a process modeling, that you level 1, 2, and 3 down to the detail. As can we talk about your approach and what you mentioned some approaches there, Lean Six Sigma, human centered. So when you come into these projects, I also want to backtrack to something you talked about, the organization. Like who would be in charge of that change? Whose responsibility is it? Is it got to come from the top? Operations, is the operations leader or team leader or manager is responsible for being the spokesperson or champion for the change, or does everyone have a role in that change?
I,
So, Tori, 2 questions there.
I think part of it, you have to have both sides. So you have to have leadership as well as operational. You have to have the doers and the leaders, because
Mm-hmm.
within that approach, to me, you're looking at it simultaneously. So you understand the big picture first. You're not trying to improve the big picture. You're just trying to understand it. Once
Yeah.
you
Okay.
have the big picture, you're empathizing. So once you understand what is the fundamental steps to for this company or organization to make profit. Maybe it's not for profit. Well, what is your general outcome of whatever you're trying to do? Improve
Yep.
services, reduce costs, whatever it is, increase student enrollment. It's X amount of steps. So once you know those general steps, now you look at those steps and say, okay, what are the experiences that happen within these steps? That's the difference to me between the CX or customer, looking at it from a customer experience down to a user experience. Now, if we know the broad perspective of the customer experience and then the touch points within those user experiences, now ideally we can get data. If we can get data, we can then look at different avenues or outcomes. So, we look at throughput. How long does it take to get through a process? We look at technology. How many database and systems do you have? Is it giving you the right information? Now, when you have all of that, that's still not the answer. That's just the background information. From there, what I typically do,
it's just understanding.
Yeah, without trying to get an answer. You might think you have an answer, but you have to gather all those facts first as a background. Because in that empathy phase, to me, there's certain things that you're trying to do. Once you have your information, if you're using a survey, using an interview, and then you have fact-finding research to support all that, you have a couple outcomes that you're looking at, organizational goals of this transformation. Maybe it's operational, maybe it's at the departmental level, it could be a smaller type of project. And what is the organizational goal of the transformation, and what is the operational goal of the transformation? So basically, what does the business want versus what the actual operations want?
Wow. So there's I think we speak the same language now. There's goals that the organization has for the transformation that the project would help and to say enable, and then the operations themselves have a set of goals, which they may not be the same, but one cause and effect to the other. Okay, so there's two types. You have a strategic level, and did you say your words were operations? Operational,
day to day. That's where that's where that process is really important. Because at the organizational or strategic level, the process is there, but it's slower and bigger. But at operational, it's typically you're doing A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. So so if you're having problems with that, your problems might be like, it could be a time, it could be technology. Maybe you have too much software. Maybe the software costs too much. And the business organizational goal could just be, I need to save money. We're losing money.
Yeah. Okay. So let me summarize that. I think there's more to it, but just a recap that the starting point is to understand get an understanding of the big picture. Whether I think this is you're talking about in terms of maybe mission or the type of business, profit, non-profit. They want to increase enrollment. What is the fundamental objective for the organization? I think that might be a better way that you would put it. The fundamental objective, then the general steps that maybe the general steps of the business model. That the understanding. This is all about understanding, not answers, but understanding the business first. And the experience within those steps in the organization. So you talked about two types of experience. So I think the customer experience. So and who is the customer's experience with the organization through their journey with touching the organization to get the product or service they want. And then the other part is the other side of that journey is the user being the staff member, what their experience is in providing that service or product to the customer. Yeah. Okay. And then to the point where you want to get to is to get the data, to understand that data. And I think if we talk in terms of almost SIPOC, someone's supplying it. There's some data that is supplied, the inputs. There's process or throughput, and maybe in your words, and the output is produced. And then some customer or consumer of that data uses it for another purpose, another process, or another purpose or product. So now you've got a understanding of big picture,
Mhm.
their purpose, their journey, their experience, whether it's been the customer interfacing with the organization or the user, the staff members' experience itself to provide that service or product to the customer. And with that experience, understanding the data,
Mhm.
the input, throughput, output. Okay, and that's you've just now really got a baseline understanding of the business. No answers because it's not about questioning it; it's just what you do. And then you talked about an empathy stage. So empathy being to understand maybe thoughts and feelings, and maybe drilling down more into that experience through questionnaires and surveys, maybe one-on-one interviews, or maybe the co-creation sessions. Yes, you talked about before. Okay, and those are the tools, with the goals being two parts: the strategic understanding, or the organization level goals,
Mhm.
and then the operational. And you talk about organization level goals of being uh, um, the slower, bigger goals. So the ones that take maybe a long time to achieve, if it's 1 year, 2 years, as opposed to operations might be, we want to see what's our turnover today, or absentee rate for the week.
Mhm.
The really short term, short phase goals where you can measure them, relatively quickly. So the operational, the day to day, these goals and reactions and events happen faster.
Mhm.
And then out of that, you want to look at the problems that is happening at those, causing those two goals. I think whether it takes too long, it costs too much, you've got too much tech. What does that overall experience look like?
Mhm.
So, have I got it so far?
That is it, and then the goal is to communicate that as simply as possible and as with something visual supported
Uh
by
huh.
data.
Okay. All right. So communicate and visual. And I love you saying this, visual. There's I see the trend, and it's been a trend for a while, and I like it, and I endorse it or respect it, about the data visualization. This is I think it's like that in terms of technology architecture or architects. There's so many different architects now of every application security data which is not needed, or API and everything. There's cyber this. So the list of architects now goes on. But then there was a new one which came about a few years ago, around the visualization analyst, or the someone who is about data visualization. And I think that's a really underrated skill and role, because I think the knowledge or the data, the insights are in the data, but not a lot of people have the ability to interpret or to draw out those insights. What do you think?
I totally agree, because that to me is one of the keys, because you're trying to communicate a problem and sense something. You're trying to communicate a problem simply. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't want to
Oh.
sit there and look through X amount of slides just to tell them what the problem is. How can you simply communicate something through,
Mm.
a smaller number of slides that effectively communicates what the problem is? And that's where that customer journey, or the journey mapping process. We often see journey maps that are pretty sophisticated visually. It's a lot of detail. They
Hmm.
look good from a
Yep.
visual standpoint. I'm a designer by trade, so they look good,
Mm.
structured, hierarchy, and everything like that. But does it work for the business?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
Does it communicate what those pain points are? And then once that the leaders of those organizations can see their pain points, the next step is to understand why. How should they fix those pain points? What should they do
Yep.
next? But now everybody's on the same page of agreement or alignment. Okay, here's our process, our processes, and these are the supporting steps within them, and this is the data that supports them, and these are the problems. And then ideally what you want
Yep.
to do is you want to take those pain points and put those into themes, because you don't want to solve, oh, this pain point fixes that, this pain point fixes
Yeah.
that. You want to constantly look holistically and look at the bottom and the top, and that's why I look both top and bottom, so
Got
project
it. Okay.
leadership simultaneously.
All right, so let me recap that. So, at the visualization part, which is such a good one, I know is fantastic. So, because you are as a start from the beginning, that you are in the detail. Where do these projects? You get the big four guys will come in and the advisory, and they'll paint a big strategy for the organization, and they may not be good at the delivery, so another group will come in, or they'll do it in house, and so where does it all fall apart? It falls apart in delivery, and you're in the coal face, so you are at where it either succeeds or not. And so these issues and concerns that you're facing is this is what it looks like. So that simply communicate is, I talk about it one in the book, and it's the students on my course, is that there's four common problems in transformation projects, four causes of transformation project failure: lack of business user involvement, lack of senior leadership support, changing requirements, and incomplete requirements. So all of those four things have got nothing to do with technology. They're all to do with people.
Mm-hmm.
Lack of business user, lack of senior leadership, change requirements from the people, incomplete requirements from the people. They're not anything to do with technology. They're all to do with people. It's a psychological problem. The problem with transformation failure isn't to do with technology. It's to do with people, and it's psychological. And so when you talk about communication and simple communication, that plays straight to addressing all of those points. So that is, for those listening, so you just heard it from the horse's mouth here, who is also a designer. So thank you for saying that. And just to add to that, I've on a previous project I was on, you also said to a language that they can understand. All right.
Mm-hmm.
How critical is that?
Very critical.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's so critical to the point that if you can't do it well, you cannot move the project, because what
Yeah.
happens is without that effective, simple communication and understanding and alignment, you cannot get to defining what the problems or the ideate phases to move the project towards implementation. I
Yep.
think I think it's one of the, like you said, I think it's an overlooked skill. I think the skill that often is looked at is, data and facilitation, but not that
Yep.
visualization facilitation skill of
Yeah.
simply communicating what the problems are, what we have, and where we should go.
Okay. Yeah. That's yeah. Okay. So that skill. So I think there's a technical skill like the business analysis skill, data insights, and then taking that data to make it visually and be able to communicate it easily, simply your words, so the business can understand it. I've been on a fairly big project where the transformation division, had decided to adopt a certain approach or it's a language standard for business process mapping, one that the business did not understand, but they forced it on them. And to the point where the business, when they would have a need for a change project, would not go and talk to the transformation division for this because they were scared, because they had things forced on them. And so I asked the question, why did you make, the actual BPMN? Why did you make BPMN the standard for your process maps? And they said, we've made it a standard so that everyone in the whole building, even if they don't work in this transformation division, they need to adopt the standard. I said, but do they understand it? They said, no. So he sent them off on a 2-day course. I said, that's like cutting a wound open and adding salt to the wound. You know, I said, man, and then they told me that the whole organization doesn't like engaging with the transformation division, because even when they need them, is because they tell them things they don't want to hear. I said, this is unbelievable. And no wonder why why did you call me in? But yeah, you got to listen to the users, understand. Like an example I gave them there was that it's like you speak this BPM notation. It's like you speak French. It's a language that you understand. It's pretty special. It's unique. But there's other languages that they also speak, which is English, and they speak and have spoken that to each other quite often, and it works. It does its job. They don't need to do specialist training. And here you are. You've spent your French speakers who've literally told them that they have to go and learn French, but not just any French, fluent French, and so you've automatically got them offside, because they got a language that works very well and it's worked well for them in the past, and now you've got to make them use another language only you understand. How about you? How's an idea, a novel idea? How about you just get better at English?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, job done. But no, they didn't want to hear that. They've made a decision, and that's oh man. So how's good luck with that. So okay, so you had to communicate, and then the outcome you're looking for is that the a lovely outcome is everyone is on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Or
You
relatively.
know, yeah, yeah. Keyword there, relatively yes. So clear on the process, clear on the steps in that process, clear on the data that is required, inputted through the process and output, those pain points of that process, where those problems lie. And then I think you have a great point there. A good takeaway for the listeners is, you may have, and on the client we're working with now, is they have at one particular phase of the project over 1,000 pain points, and so yes, the way to, as you said, which I really like, was themes. Identify the themes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
if you work at an individual level, you can get lost in such nuances that you can't finish the project. So,
yeah.
so you always have to understand the outcome of the project and the outcome for the business simultaneously. So, there might be 1,000 pain points, but I'm sure those go into some type of theme. I'm sure that they do, because
Oh yeah,
we're not looking at, okay, a great outcome isn't necessarily saying, oh no, we found 1,000 problems, or we found 10,000 problems. That, I guess it could be good for some people, but usually the goal is to improve that business, whether it's innovation, whether it's reducing costs, whether it's whatever, so
yeah,
you have to understand what the business outcome is, and maybe sometimes the outcome is to find those pain points, but the next step would be, okay, what are you going to do with those pain points? How are you going to get rid of
yeah,
them, and which ones should you get rid of? Now
and
we get into prioritization. Now we,
yeah,
and get back into organizational misalignment, because each department is going to have different priorities on what they feel. So
mm,
that could be
yep.
a potentially a problem. I've run into problems like that, trying to balance everyone's needs, um, of problems.
And how do you do that? How do you balance everyone's needs? That's
Typically,
a skill, right?
it's a skill, but you gotta. In my experience, you have to use a scorecard. You have to use
Uh
something
huh.
that takes your personal perspective versus their perspective out of it. You know,
So remove the bias, remove the perception bias.
yes. So it could be, in technology or in development, often it's 1, 2, and 3, but you can move it all the way up to 10, so you can get a bigger variation. In that way, you can at least have a justified means of putting something in terms of priority versus another project.
So you're talking about there if you had a score or rating from 1 to 10, so you have a long or wide the difference between the different scores as opposed to 1 and 3, like
Hmm.
low, medium, high.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So note there for the listeners, don't make a small range on your prioritization criteria. It's probably not going to help you. Give and go. I'm in the middle of the road, medium. Everyone's medium, so there's no priority. Okay, so you balance the needs for your scorecard and one of the tools or techniques you use there is a scorecard. So you've got your outcomes, you've got the process, the pain points. So we've done some prioritization. You've had conversations with different parts of the project or different parts of the organization. You've agreed on where the misalignment is and start identifying areas that you want to focus on. That's just on the pain points. So have we gone from out of discovery into design? Where are we sitting in the process there?
So what we do is you go in and discovery and design back and forth. That is,
Uh-huh. Oh, that's an iterative feedback loop.
yeah, you go back and forth into it.
Uh-huh.
You go back and forth as you get feedback. You might refine it. You might so basically, within that empathy phase, you're understanding, like we talked about, the goals of the organization, goals of the
Yeah.
operations, what those pain points are, and then we want to understand their data maturity. If we can do that, then ideally underneath that, we build a hypothesis, but we don't show the client
Oh,
that. We build a
okay.
hypothesis, figuring out
This
can
is
we
problem hypothesis or solution hypothesis?
solution.
Okay.
But you
So potential improvement opportunities to address those pain points.
but you work within your internal team to kind of, can we do
Uh-huh.
this? How much would this cost? What are really all of the steps to doing this while you're engaging with the client on alignment? because then you still have to
Okay.
define what the problem is, right? From your research, you're defining what the problem is. So then when you ideate, that background hypothesis comes into the forefront. That comes into the forefront. Now you can
Yeah.
validate that. They can say, no, we don't like
Uh-huh.
that, or yes, we like that, or just change this. And then when you get into that prototype and test, that's where it's like a fork in the road. Are you dealing with a product, or are you dealing with service? If you're dealing with a product, you're going to probably do usability testing. You might have 2 or 3 rounds of that, or you can consistently improve that over time. And then we move more into the implementation development, and then with improving, using probably SMART goals or KPIs, either one. But when you get into a service, you're getting ready to pivot into change management. You're getting
Okay.
ready. So there is no prototype. It's like, oh, this is getting ready to change. So you got to make sure that change management is involved early enough. So whenever that implementation is getting ready to occur, they know
Yep.
before it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, um, let's recap that. So, you you have the difference between the stage. So, one stage or the early stage is really discovery. Then empathy is it, and then your feedback loop. But and that feedback loop is, which I talk about in my course of my guys, is about you got really 2 sets of documentation. I think it's also in the book that you got the client facing and you've got your internal that you for the developing of your hypothesis. That you probably wouldn't want to show the client, or you could, but if it may bamboozle the client because it's your workings, it's your draft version. I don't know. So if Van Gogh showed us, or Van Gogh's drafts are probably worth millions, so if you want to see those, but the workings behind the scene is for your internal, your colleagues, that you come up with these hypotheses and solutions. So you have the 2 types, internal and external. I think so maybe the junior consultants get mixed up as they want to share everything and are eager to share, but in doing so, sharing the wrong things or too much information. And what does too much information do? It's overwhelming. And so, the good point there. Don't show everything because it can be overwhelming. You don't want to overwhelm the business. They're already overwhelmed. That's because you're there. Why you're there in the first place, to get rid of this overwhelmness. Okay, so there was that's internal document. So after that, and as part of your internal solution hypotheses, you're coming up with solution options. I think would it be? Yeah, and then you're getting those, playing them back to the client in a validation session or sessions.
Mm-hmm.
For them to give the approval. From that point, you're going to develop your MVP or pilot or your prototype,
Mm-hmm.
whether it is be mainly a product on a, like I like to call with from a service side or a process side, a minimum viable process, so that as opposed to a minimal viable product. So test a small part of the process or the full end-to-end process, but on a lighter scale, like you would do a vanilla or a light version of a prototype or technology app or a website, where you give the minimum functionality from end to end across the whole use of that experience, user journey, user experience.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the process. So you trial that, get some feedback. Based on the feedback, then you'll go, okay, we're either going to, hopefully, your product, less of the change management involvement. If it's a service, you're going to bring in more change management, or bring the change management early to help with that change, transformation, embedding. And then, if, depending on the success of that prototype, take on feedback if needed it. If not, go into development, build, and then implement.
Mm-hmm. And then improve. You should
Oh,
be using the KPIs to understand how to improve it. And that improvement might not be, now if we're working at an incremental level, of course it's going to be bugs. But when we work at a business level, it's not going to be as incremental, because we want to look for
mm-hmm.
themes. Oh boy, we're learning that people are having issues with the data, the back end. We want to get enough
Yep.
feedback to understand, is it people processing technology? Is it one of 3? Is it 2? Or is it everything? And not reactive updating like you typically see in a prototype. Because often when you reactively update, eventually you build something that you don't even have track of. You lost
Yeah, it's
track
too
of
many
what that
changes.
experience is, because you just listened to everybody else, and, well, what was the overall goal of it? So you have
Mm.
there's a balance in between feedback and using the feedback in an effective way to improve the business, or the use of it for the business.
Okay, so you got to be a bit smart about the feedback,
Hmm.
not be reactive. If I use your words, reactive to all feedback. Sensible. I think it's a very good point, because there is times where you might get the loudest stakeholder or group of stakeholders giving their feedback, and then you take on that feedback. But what you end up doing is changing the goal or objective of the product or service in the first place, because you listen to the wrong stakeholders.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so I think I got your process, understanding the process. What should we call it? The first is the is it the first is the empathy phase, and then we're going into um what would we call the next one? Hypothesis
Well,
phase. Well,
the words that I use is empathy. Then I define. So define the problem from that empathy. Basically, you're looking for
uh,
root causes, and then you
yep.
ideate. And that ideate is
Okay.
basically,
Empathy, define, ideate,
yep. And then you prototype and test if it's product, change
prototype, and
management if
test.
it's
Yep.
service comes into place there. Then you implement and improve.
So then implement and improve. So how many steps we got there? One for empathy, two define, three ideate,
Uh,
four prototype, five test, a six implement, and then seven improve.
yep. And you can mix and
Alrighty.
match. You
Yeah.
to a degree. You want to the most critical ones, I believe personally, are the first three. You really have to empathize with that user or those customers and the business. You got to know the root cause of the problem so you can have the biggest impact. And then the
Yep.
ideate, that's where you use your strategic thinking as a creative, as a business person. All of that acumen comes into place in that phase. The prototyping and testing and that change management, I think is critical. And then to implement, you actually have to have an outcome for it. But to improve it, you have to know what you're trying to improve to continuously be able to do that.
Alrighty. Okay. So the critical three part, the three first three steps, the empathy, the empathy, the define to understand the root cause, so you have the biggest impact, and the ideate, so that you can provide a solutions that address directly those pain points.
Hmm.
Now, okay, so now you're at this point in your career. If you were to look back and go, if I could do do it differently, or from what I know now, what would you do differently?
What's funny about that question is that this stuff, digital transformation, in my personal opinion, is a combination of all of these newer skill sets: the UX, the service design, and the customer experience. Business analysis isn't new, but the way that it could be
Yep.
done or used to be
Uh-huh.
done, or that a business analyst was someone that basically wrote traditional requirements versus today we're
Mm-hmm.
using human centered design to get requirements.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you have to understand the details before you can understand the bigger picture to be able to work on a transformation. But if I can do anything different, is to basically understand um, what all of these facets are. Like, what is human centered design? What is customer experience? What is business analysis? And what is change management, Lean Six Sigma? And then when we talk about implementation, there's multiple ways you can implement things, but you're talking about, like 6, 7 different skill sets,
Mm.
that is rare in one person. And I just happen to fall into it by working out of my comfort zone. I'm
Yeah.
trained as a designer. I went to school to be an educator. So I use things like Bloom taxonomy, which is a learning strategy to understand outcomes, to Lean Six
Uh-huh.
Sigma, which I learned from a black belt to look at an overall process. And then business school would taught me, marketing, operations, operation
Yeah.
management, all of those things together. So
Yeah.
I think for anybody, it's just to learn the different facets of a digital and business transformation.
Okay, so not just one. You need to have a broad range of one's skills and experience and tools and techniques.
Hmm. To be effective at it.
Oh,
You can work in one part of it, but I think that when you work in one part, like organizations hire a service designer, but they really want someone to impact the business, but they're only looking at one little piece and you can't do it.
yeah.
you can't impact the business by doing a small portion, but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you need to be the chief such and such officer to do it. But what it
Yeah.
means is that the higher levels of the organization have to understand all of the departments that these transformations touch. And maybe we put this into a roadmap and we look at this, periodically. This is the first quarter, this is the second quarter, or this is the third quarter,
Yep. Yep.
as a means to an outcome.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, but so the the takeaway being a broad range of skills to be more effective. That, like you just said there, like they might want bring in a UX person because they want to design the UI UX, but that's one specific aspect of the overall output or outcome they're trying to achieve, which was to implement the transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So, so from a newbie coming into this, then I think like I have a niece that is actually she competed in the Olympics in shot put, and I think came number 6, and then she's a world junior champion, and some time ago that I played sports at a semi let's say good level, and so I had a few tips for her. And part of those tips were, although it's shot put, right? So there's other things like even ballet for balance, and because she works on strength, and really there's not a lot of movement in shot put other than going, it's spinning on the circle, which is not that wide, or crossing the circle and really throwing it. So, but there's there's a limited really skill other than let's say tools and techniques that you would use for that particular sport. Not say limited in skill, but there. Would you think of using ballet? I said, no, ballet for balance,
Mm-hmm.
And for be able to change your body position and, height and to get an outcome you're looking for. And so like what you were talking about there, UX, UI, different tools and techniques or practices and standard like Lean Six Sigma, specifically around process. And then the business schools or business school around operations or functional roles or disciplines in an organization, marketing, sales, HR, finance, etc. So it's an underrated practice, I think, business analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I saw I had a conversation with a client the other day, and they said, so basically, tell me what you do on a day-to-day basis. And I told them, I said, so you're basically like the horse whisperer of strategy, of operations. And I said, well, I don't know about the whisperer, but you need to be able to communicate. I think that's the key takeaway. Would you say?
Mm-hmm. Definitely communicate and understand. I mean, you're not an expert at anything. I've seen the term neo-generalist. So you can't have too much depth in a limited amount of functions. You have to have depth over other functions and be able to understand how they integrate. Because within your approach or multiple approaches, it's never exactly that way. So you might be able to understand the client, but you might not have enough time to define the problem. But you have to understand from what you can gather in the empathy phase to assume what a problem could be. And then when you get time, if you have supporting data, while at the same time you're ideating and go back. It's not always, okay, I have time to do this. I'm going to take time to do this. A lot of times it's like, what can you do in 12 weeks, 3 months? So time is often a measure. And that's why data is so important, because that often makes those outcomes clean. And it makes them fact-based and not, I'm an expert. Evidence. I know more because of this, because you can learn from anybody. You can learn from anybody, in my opinion, anybody and everybody. You just need to take the combinations of information and put it together and understand, using this information that I have, how can I get this outcome, or what is stopping the organization from getting this outcome.
Mate, that's music to my ears there. That you can learn from anybody. I think that's how I started my career, is really learning from my colleagues and more senior colleagues. And then I think that sparked a few interest in furthering my knowledge, and then also qualifications. But definitely, the knowledge is key. Communication is right up there. I think in what you're talking about generally is understanding, like you talked about, simple communication, and those different tools and techniques and standards allow you to, like I talk about in terms of business architecture, you're putting everything in building blocks, and the way the organization is structured by building block by building block is that you're looking at particular element of the business for a specific lens that allows you to interpret what's going on there. Process, Lean Six Sigma, change management, and talking about negotiation and language and empire building. So in the empathy, you even have a stage in your process called empathy. So your major, I think the communication part, understanding your stakeholders, understanding the language that they have and use, and speaking to them and meeting them at where they are, and taking them through the journey.
I think that's definitely key. Definitely key. And visualizing that journey. Visualization is probably one of the more effective and simple ways to communicate and align.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I could tell you some stories about visualization. I know some people that could do with a lot of visualization because they like they to tell somebody something. What the picture they paint in their head of what that looks like versus everyone else's understanding or interpretation of that. Yeah, that the visual picture. What do they say? A picture says 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
That one picture could save you 1,000 words. So that now we agree. Now this is blue. You see blue. That's blue. That's blue. That's definitely blue. It gets everyone on the same page quickly. Okay, so Kenneth, my man, I think that it would be great actually to work on a project with you. Maybe in the States sometime I'll come over there and we do some work together. That will be cool. You never know, eh?
Never know.
You never know. Okay, Lennon, Kenneth, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the insights.
Thanks a lot.